Ave Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, estes nostra salve.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "Be watchful, be alert. You do not know when the time will come. It is like a man traveling abroad. He leaves home and places his servants in charge, each with his own work, and orders the gatekeeper to be on the watch. Watch therefore. You do not know when the Lord of the house is coming, whether in the evening or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or in the morning. May he not come suddenly and find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to all, watch." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Have to look too far to understand something about the heritage and the history of Manchester, New Hampshire, or this great church. Just drive down Amory Street and cross the bridge, and it's lined across the river. All these old mill buildings. All those mill buildings are a great part of the history and the heritage of this community, because many, many people who lived in this community migrated from Canada and came to work here in the mills. And I suspect that when Monsignor Heavey built this church, that many of the people who worked in those mills came after their shifts and worked on this church. I say that because I was born and raised in Lewiston, Maine, a big mill town. And those folks, when they were done their shifts working at Bates Fabrics, back then called Bates Mill, they would get out of their shift work and they would come and they would build the church, St. Peter and St. Paul, which is now basilica status. They called that church the church that nickels and dimes built, because all of those French people who worked in those mills created this. One of the most important jobs in the mill was the night watchman. He was the gatekeeper. And I know this because prior to my becoming a priest, I managed a mill. I tell people I've always been a man of the cloth. But the reason that the night watchman was one of the most important jobs in the mill is because not all of the departments were working on all three shifts. And the night watchman's job was every hour on the hour, he had to take his clock and he'd walk through the different departments in the mill. And he would clock in and clock out, because his job was to go to every different department to make sure there were no fires. Can you imagine what would have happened if a small little fire, and remember, these cotton mills, highly, highly ignitable. Can you imagine what would have happened to any one of these buildings had a small fire started in a place where there were no people on the third shift? And so the night watchman's job was to go from place to place, especially in the dark areas of the mill on the third shift at night, to make sure that everything was as it should be, safe. This is the exact image that Jesus is using in the gospel this morning, telling us that we need to be like night watchmen. That we have to make sure that we're clocking in on a regular basis. That we go to those dark areas of our lives, which sometimes don't get to be checked out. He's very clear that we don't know the time, the day, or the hour, and he uses the different watches of the night because the night was separated into different watches. And he uses those different watches of the night as an example for when he's going to return. And so the best way that I know as a Catholic to make sure that I'm like a night watchman is to be going to confession on a regular basis. And I find that this is a sacrament that has fallen on hard times. Part of the problem is that we've not really explained to you why you should be going to confession. You don't go to confession because you're a bad person. You go to confession because we are weak and wounded. It has to do with our fallen human nature. It's called concupiscence. That's where we sin, where we're weak and wounded. And so the reason that you go to confession on a regular basis is for the same reason that you take a shower on a regular basis, to stay, what? Healthy, to have good personal hygiene. We go to confession on a regular basis to practice good spiritual hygiene. And so the grace of the sacrament strengthens what is weak and heals what is wounded. If you're anything like me, you bring the same sins to confession over and over and over again, because that's where I'm weak. That's where I'm wounded. I need healing and I need strengthening. The grace of the sacrament provides for that spiritual healing and strengthening. During this time of Advent, we are called to be like night watchmen, to go to those different departments in our heart because we have a tendency to compartmentalize our lives. This part's for God. This part's for me. This part's for my work life. This part's for my home life. No. It all belongs to Christ. We've been purchased at a great price. We are not our own. I recommend confession at least once per month. Personally, I go every week because I want the grace of the sacrament. I want the grace of the sacrament. You are blessed here at St. Marie Parish. Father Mo hears confessions every Wednesday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. and I think during Advent on Mondays. Correct, Father? Monday and Wednesday evenings. To be like night watchmen. To prepare for the coming of Christ. I really love what I read in the office of readings this morning by St. Cyril of Jerusalem that I want to share with you. He says that Christ's first coming was to fulfill his plan of love, to teach men by gentle persuasion. This time, whether men like it or not, they will be subjects of his kingdom by necessity. Malachi, the prophet, speaks of the two comings. And the Lord whom you seek will come suddenly to his temple. That is one coming. Again, he says of another coming, look, the Lord Almighty will come, and who will endure the day of his entry? Or who will stand in his sight? Because he comes like a refiner's fire, a fuller's lye, and he will sit refining and cleansing. Now's the time to be like night watchmen, to make sure that all the departments in the heart are safe.